Good Wednesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. It is schedule release day only in the NFL. Could you create such a thing? We know for certain that the Browns will not be playing internationally. The NFL confirmed that recently. So it's the Packers and the Eagles in Brazil. Jets, Vikings, Jaguars, Bears, Patriots, Jaguars in London. Giants and Panthers will be in Munich, Germany. Additionally, it will be the Chiefs against the Steelers and the Ravens against the Texans on Netflix, a new streaming partner for the two Christmas Day games. Those will be exclusively on Netflix. Let's welcome in Scott Petrak. He is the Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. So, Scott, no international games, no Christmas Day games. With the teams the Browns play in the division, as well as like the Eagles, the Chargers, the Chiefs, they're still going to end up getting, I think, 3 or 4 primetime nationally televised games.
Yeah, you know, I did a kind of schedule analysis or questions I had this week, and I put it the over-under 3.5. It felt like the right one, the right number. I think they had 2 last year, 2 primetime games. It should be more this year. They're coming off a playoff berth. The roster's good. And like you mentioned, the other half of the equation is they play a bunch of good teams, a bunch of good quarterbacks. And we know the quarterbacks are such a big part of who gets to play in prime time.
Yeah, and the Browns will have a huge Week 1 game. They play Cowboys Week 1, 4:25 on Fox. It's the debut of Tom Brady as the lead analyst for Fox. So the question that people are asking nationally, who has more to gain from that game? Dak Prescott in the final year of his contract. He's not under contract next year. Or Deshaun Watson. Here's Emmanuel Acho's answer this from FS1 Speak.
I think Deshaun has way more to gain. Way more to gain. I think he has more to gain financially, if we're being honest. If you just play reasonably well, the Cleveland Browns will re-up you. If you just play reasonably well, the Browns will sit there and say, wait a second, this is the Deshaun that we always thought we always had. And then if you play well, you can change the narrative in our minds of who you currently are as a quarterback. Last 2 years haven't been good, but as Shady so well alluded to, Deshaun Watson wasn't just good in the league. He led the league in passing yards.
He was special.
He didn't just lead the league in passing yards. He led the league in yards per attempt, which tells you it wasn't just a high volume of throws. He was chucking the ball to receivers even when D-Hop wasn't out there. But who is Deshaun Watson right here, right now? So not only can Deshaun Watson change the narrative in our minds, which might even be more important than trying to re-up again, but on top of changing the narrative on our minds, the Browns have been yearning to pay Deshaun Watson. They were 3 years ago. And obviously, if he proves competency, they'll do the same thing again. I think Deshaun has everything to gain.
Scott, the other thing is that's more of a national narrative than a local narrative, I think. Been injured. I'm curious to see what the offense looks like with Ken Dorsey. And I know you got little glimpses of it from rookie minicamp. How much they tailor it to Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, I think, looking ahead, I don't think one game is going to make the difference in, what kind of contract Watson signs 2 years from now. He's under contract through, 26. But I do think, he has to prove that, he has to start to prove that he's back to being or can get back to being the player he was in Houston. We've talked about since the day he showed up. He just hasn't been on the field, whether it's suspension or injury. He hasn't been consistent enough, and I think that starts, the Browns need it to start. He needs it to start Week 1, right? He needs to start this year and have consistency and stay on the field and be available and all those things. And, Dak Prescott, whether or not he gets a contract extension with the Cowboys, is going to get paid huge money somewhere. So, I don't think it's so much about Dak, but I think Deshaun Watson has a lot to prove, and part of that is the offensive change. Like you mentioned, Ken Dorsey. It's going to be more spread out. We're going to see more 3 and 4 receiver sets. And how does that suit Watson's game? And the fact is it should suit his game, and that's something he should be real comfortable with. And do you start to see that right away, that he fits kind of seamlessly into the new scheme?
The other thing is that you're connecting the dots with it. It's Dorsey, which goes to Dable, which goes to Bill O'Brien. That's the system he threw he went crazy in Houston.
Yeah, there's certainly that connection, right? There's no doubt about it. I tend to be a little more careful with, okay, that's going to be apples to apples, right? Things change, the league changes, he's changed. But we know that Watson feels more comfortable in a shotgun. We know he feels more comfortable spread out. He said that. I mean, I think he'd been in Berea like 2 days at the start of the offseason program. He was already talking about the freedom of Ken Dorsey's offense, the spread factor of Dorsey's offense. I think we'll see more RPOs. So all that does suit Watson's skill set and his style of play and his preferences. And I think there is a sense of, reminiscence going back to those days with Houston when he was, a top 5 quarterback in the league.
So the other thing that, I don't know if we're not talking enough about it. Maybe we don't have to talk about it. No quarterback has had the injury he's coming back from. That concerns me. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the fact that nobody's had to do it, there's a thing called Tommy John surgery for pitchers because of that.
Yeah, it certainly adds a layer of, I don't think confusion's the right word, but a layer of maybe doubt to this whole return. When I think of broken bone, I think, okay, bones heal, right?
Yep.
Now, the problem with the shoulder bone is that there's a lot of other stuff inside there. And Watson, when we talked to him in April, mentioned, the labrum there had to be work done to labrum because it connects to the shoulder bone. So it's not just as simple as a broken leg like Zach Zinter, right? The Michigan guard. He had a broken leg. He's fine. The Browns weren't worried about that at all. This is more complicated. It's a quarterback. It's his throwing arm. Obviously, the progress reports have been good on Watson so far. I don't know how much he's going to throw in OTAs. We're out there next week. It's the first chance we would get to see him if he in fact throws. But yeah, that adds a cloud to all of us.
All right. Before we go to break, I know you wrote an article about it. Ronnie McLeod has announced this will be his final year. Take us through that article and just what you sensed in writing that.
Yeah, I guess he said it Friday on NFL Network. I didn't notice it, but he posted the video on his X page. And, it makes sense. I think he's turning 34 at the end of next month. It'll be his 13th year in the league. He didn't want to go out the way last year ended. And part of that is, the Browns get knocked out in the first round. But a lot of it is he finished the season on the sideline. He had the torn bicep against Pittsburgh November 19th. Couldn't play the rest of the year. I think when you're a proud guy and you've had such a strong career and it's an injury you can come back from, like the torn bicep is, then you try to do it. And, some guys, they don't want to announce it ahead of time, right? They want to see how the season goes. I don't think they want to kind of constrain themselves. But McLeod's been around a long time. He's a smart guy. He knows himself. He knows his body. He knows how he wants to go out. And so he says this will be the last year, and he's got some unfinished business. He hopes he stays healthy, can finish the year, and then the Browns can make, that Super Bowl run that he was a part of when the Eagles went a couple years ago.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also catch him on brownzone.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, some national reaction to the Browns draft class, plus some takeaways from rookie minicamp that wrapped up over the weekend. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also check him out, brownzone.com on the internet. Chris Trapasso from CBS Sports, one of their draft guys, gave his thoughts about the 2024 Browns draft class.
Cleveland's best pick may have been the best pick in the entire draft. That was second-round defensive lineman from Ohio State, Michael Hall. While he wasn't a full-time player with the Buckeyes, Hall will be 21 as a rookie, has pass rush moves, elite athleticism, and he holds up pretty well against the run for being one of those technically undersized defensive linemen. He is going to rock with Myles Garrett and Jim Schwartz's defense. The worst pick the Browns made was the next one, third-round selection Zach Zinter from Michigan. Look, I don't think Zinter is a bad player, but I saw a lot of stiffness on film, and he is coming off that late-season injury. Plus, he's already 23 years old. I didn't see a high-caliber athlete or someone with a ton of power. I even liked fifth-round pick wide receiver Jamari Thrash from Louisville. Based on how frequently Thrash got open, his ability after the catch, and a pretty good pre-draft workout, I thought he should have been picked way earlier than this. Overall grade, A-.
Scott, when I heard the Zinter pick, and people who watch the show know I liked the Zinter pick. You're not looking for guards aren't athletic. Those are the guys that go and maul in the middle of the field. I mean,
don't tell Joe Bitonio that, Dave.
He can get out and run. I mean, he pulls, but it's not like you're looking for a 3-cone drill when you've got guys when you're lined up between the tackle and the center.
No, I know what you're saying. It's interesting. You know, I watched Zinter last weekend at the rookie camp, and you know they're not going against anybody, so you don't get it. I don't know if you get a great gauge of the power, but you do see him come in, pull, and fire off. And, you know, it's a little awkward maybe, but so is Joe Bitonio, right? So when I got done watching, not that I'm, you know, an offensive line expert, but you get done watching it, and you think, okay, this guy moves well enough. And that was my, you know, my amateur scouting report was he moves well enough. I know he's a smart guy. He held up at Michigan and played really well there, and they got a big-time line and a big-time program. So, you know, I think he's a fine pick. You know, if he's starting in 2026, which – you know, I think would be the plan because you got the other 2 guards under contract for 2 more years. You know, that's all you're looking for, and you hope he's a third rounder that he can start for the next, you know, 5 or 7 years. And, you know, obviously I'm forecasting way down the road, but that doesn't seem unreasonable for a third-round pick that the Browns like and had a really strong career at Michigan.
Yeah, it you know, was referred to as the heart and soul of that line, and that was they basically came out and said we're going to run the ball, stop us, and won a national championship. Now he was injured in the 2 playoff games, but you got to look at Mike Hall as junior, 20 plus, not 21 yet. Wrote a couple stories about him. What were your takeaways from Hall?
Yeah, you know, I talked to his D-line coach at Ohio State, Larry Johnson. He's the associate head coach. I've wound up, you know, it feels either there's local kids that played for Larry Johnson or the Browns drafted like Tommy Togiai. So I've talked to Johnson a bunch, and, you know, people just rave about him. He might be the best defensive line coach in the country. That's what the Buckeyes call him on their website in his bio. And, you know, he raved about Mike Hall, thinks he fits perfectly with the Jim Schwartz scheme, right? That's what we keep hearing. It's something consistent, you know, from the Browns, from Larry Johnson, from Mike Hall Jr. himself, that it's the attack, get up the field. You know, he's not a 2-gap guy. The Browns are going to play him at the 3 technique. He just needs to penetrate, and he has that ability. He's got that first step. He's got long arms, which the Browns believe, and Larry Johnson thinks is really an asset at that position. You know, 6'3", long arms, powerful guy. Hall says, hey, I got strong legs too. I can squat a bunch of weight. So he thinks he's a full package when it comes to that. You know, and then I think sometimes you worry about a kid coming home, right? It's such a good story. Oh, it's a local kid, you know, Cleveland, Garfield Heights, and Streetsboro. But there can be issues there, and Larry Johnson thinks it's the perfect fit. So does Mike Hall, that it's great for him to come home. You know, he's close with his mom, close with his brother. Just thinks that he will really thrive in Cleveland for his hometown team. He talked about, you know, that they were super close, Mike Hall and Larry Johnson, and you know, he was almost like a father figure, and he would talk to him, and then Larry Johnson said, hey, you should go see a sports psychologist, and Hall did that, and he said it really helped him. So I just think he's in a good spot for the Browns. I think it's a good spot for him. There's not a whole lot of pressure on him. He's got, you know, a bunch of veteran guys in front of him. So if he can just contribute a little bit, get in that rotation, you know, kind of it's all gravy after that. And I think there's a chance that he is, you know, I mean, obviously you hope he's the Browns' best pick. He's the first one, but could be one of the steals of the draft.
The other thing to keep in mind, 20-year-olds get a little bit bigger. I mean, realistically, he's 2 years out of high school. You know, if you think about it in terms of that, 2-3 years out of high school, imagine the amount of strength and mass you're going to get just by getting older.
Yeah, you know, I think it's more about, I think that's a good point. It's more about strength. Like, the Browns are careful about, they don't want him to get too big. Like, they don't want him to turn into Siaki Ika, right? As soon as he loses half a step, right, that quickness, that penetration, that get off, you know, of the snap, then they want him to lose weight. So, yes, if he got a little bit bigger and kept the same quickness, that'd be ideal. But their number one priority is, can he stay as quick as he is now and as disruptive as a penetrator as he was at Ohio State?
So the rookie minicamp, which wrapped up over the weekend, also, you know, you get to see the rookies. You also get to see the interaction of all the new not head coaches, but the new coaches. And there's a ton of them, both offensive, defensive line coach. What were your takeaways from the new coaches that were hired to be assistants on the Browns staff?
Yeah, there are a ton of them, right? The few that I narrowed in on, like, I didn't spend a lot of time watching Deuce Staley and the running backs, but I did watch Andy Dickerson, the O-line coach, and then assistant O-line coach Roy Isvan. It's just a different, let's say, call it a vibe than when Bill Callahan and Scott Peters were here, right? They'd been here a long time. Callahan is, you know, a veteran. We all know how good he is, but he's a grizzled guy, right? It's hard. He gets all over these guys. You know, it was tough. Like, his practices were really tough. And not that Dickerson's won't be, but it felt like Dickerson was more hands-on, you know, teaching guys technique, working with them that way. You know, Callahan would just drill over and over and over. But it's just a different tone, I would say. And then you watch Jacques Césaire, the D-line coach, and talk about hands-on, right? But like Mike Hall, for instance, would get in his stance, and Caesar would come over and check his foot position, check his knee position, check his hand position, check his elbow, like literally holding, or I hate saying literally, but holding his arms in every part of the body to make sure it's exactly where the Browns wanted to be. You know, fiery personality, which you need to be a D-line coach. So I was impressed by him, and, you know, I think that's what you're looking for. You know, Jim Schwartz talks about the D-line is the engine of that defense, and you want a coach that is really revving those guys up. And after watching 2 practices, that's certainly the impression you get from Jacques Césaire.
Yeah, and again, coaches have to be themselves. So they brought in guys who are a little younger, a little more hands-on, a little more fiery, and that's fine. I'm also interested in this. I know you're working on a story on Nathaniel Watson, the linebacker from Mississippi State. You heard Andrew Berry talk about him, and ever since Berry's press conference, I've been intrigued. What did you find out about Watson?
Yeah, there's a few things that stick out to me. The intelligence part. And what struck me when Andrew Berry talked about Watson is he said we envisioned him calling the plays at some point. And I don't remember Berry saying that about many rookies. Maybe I forgot about it. You know, maybe he said it about JOK. But that stuck out to me. So I asked his coaches about it. One of his college coaches at Mississippi State, his high school coach, and they raved about his intelligence. He's got a master's degree. The coach, his linebacker coordinator coach from Mississippi State is now at UConn, is the defensive coordinator. And he told a story about in 2020, all the Sam linebackers got hit with COVID. They couldn't play. Watson was an off-ball guy at the time, had been working at Will and Mike, and they took him in a parking lot the day before they played Georgia and taught him how to play Sam. And he said he was great in the game. They held Georgia to 8 rushing yards. And that just speaks to how fast he can pick things up. Said he can call defense from without a problem. He notices the smallest things that can make on-field adjustments, like at the snap of the fingers. So that impressed me. And then, you know, he had a couple of issues that showed up in the pre-draft stuff, right? He had a drag racing thing in high school, and then a suspected DUI in college. And his high school coach said the drag racing thing got blown out of proportion. Nothing ever came of it, and he raved about the kid, said, hey, he could babysit his kids anytime. And then the one at Mississippi State, I called down. He did kind of one of those programs. It got wiped from his record, and I was talking to him about it, and he said, hey, you know, I learned that you got to be really cautious whatever you do. He said, all the teams asked me about it. I gave them the right answer. And he leaned into my tape recorder and said, I have a clean record, Cleveland, clean record. So he really comes across as a good guy. He says that, he learned from the mistakes. And I just think he's a guy that can fit in this linebacking core. And maybe it's not right away, but at some point you're looking at a guy who's, could be a starting strong side linebacker, maybe even the middle for this team.
Well, remember the last time they went mid to late rounds at Mississippi State, they came away with Martin Emerson Jr. So same side of the ball.
Yeah, and they're buddies, and they've talked since the draft. And I asked the Mississippi State coach about Emerson, and he goes, he was good. He goes, I didn't know he'd be this good in the NFL. He goes, I wasn't sure if it would translate to the level it did, but it certainly has. And he raved about, the character and the work ethic that Emerson had. And just, that's two guys that it's going to make the transition easier for Watson, having a friendly face, in that locker room.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com and Ogden's website. Take one more time out. Come back on the other side of the break. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. You can also check out his work, BrownsZone.com, on the internet. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Morning, guys. I saw part of our first game, which was against Dallas. Saw the rest of the schedule. And we'll win 5 games at best. The reason why I believe that is we're keeping Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, okay? The Cleveland Browns are not strong enough, not motivated enough, and not focused enough to ever win a Super Bowl. And you never hear from anyone in that organization say, we're going to try and win the Super Bowl this year, or we're going after the Super Bowl. They don't care about it at all.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, they mention the Super Bowl, but they kind of do it in steps. I don't know how you can find fault with one of the rosters that's ranked among the top, and a guy that has won Coach of the Year twice in 4 years and won with 4 different quarterbacks. You just must not like the guys.
Right. I mean, they acknowledge that the goal is to win the Super Bowl. Nobody shies away from it. They don't talk about it on a daily basis during the season because I think that's counterproductive. And I certainly know that Kevin Stefanski believes it's counterproductive. It's a whole one game at a time thing, right? And it feels trite, but that's how you have to play in this league. It can't be focusing on the middle of February when you're playing a game in September or October. You can't do that. So they admit it, they talk about it, they acknowledge it, they talk about it. Yes, that's what they want to do. And then it becomes just in the back of your mind. And, as far as Barry and Stefanski are concerned, I think the caller's going to have to get used to them. They're going to be here. I think they deserve to be here, and I think they give the Browns a good chance to succeed. And if they won 5 games, only 5 games, I would be surprised.
Yeah, I would be shocked. All I have to say is look at where they were when they took over. Look at where they are now. Night and day, and it looks like they can sustain it. We'll see. All right, 2024 offseason grades for all 32 NFL teams. This is from Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus. Has been on the show a couple times. Browns, he says, B-. Cleveland didn't make a ton of splash moves. Their big move trading for Jerry Jeudy. Their draft didn't move the needle for me. Actually overdrafted a few players relative to his board, but they remain a near complete roster. So execution is all that remains. That's a fair assessment. They didn't make splash moves, but they didn't need to. You don't force things. Would I have liked them to get another tight end? Maybe.
Yeah, I'm with you. And we had that discussion about the draft, right? Like, the draft was only going to be so exciting without a first-round pick. They wanted to get younger and deeper on both interiors. Those are not exciting picks. It's going to come, the offseason to me is going to come down to how well does Jerry Jeudy play, right? Does he play like a first-round pick? If he does, then it's a successful offseason. And then, obviously, they agreed to the extension with him so that I think adds pressure to his performance. But that was the signature move. Then they re-signed a bunch of guys. Darius Smith was a big, the ability to retain him, I think, was big for that number one ranked defense. But yeah, they had most of the roster in place, so it wasn't going to be a thrilling offseason. But I'm fine with that B-. I just don't think you can be upset about that.
No, that's what good teams do. Good teams, they got guys back that they needed to get back. They added a couple. I had no problem at all. I thought the Jerry Jeudy extension was a really, I think it's a smart move. It's consistent with the way Andrew Berry has done business.
It is. You know what? I'm starting to come to your side, Dave. When it first happened, I thought, man, he hasn't proven anything. Is it too early to give it to him? Do you need him in your building and see him work? But then if you hear Andrew Berry talk about it and explain it, they wanted to get ahead of the receiver market. And, it's exploding. They feel like they locked him in at a good rate. Now, if he's a total disaster, then it's a bad signing. But if he's good like they think he is, and if you trade for him, you think he's going to be good, right? You don't trade for him on a whim, then the extension makes all the sense.
Yeah, you trust your evaluation of the player because there's going to be several guys, more than two, that get $35+ million a year in that receiver market. So, and people will. I'm tired of people saying Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson have nothing to do with Jerry Jeudy's contract. Well, yeah, if the top end of the market is 35, everything else gets pushed up. So it's got everything to do with it. Stop sending me those emails; they drive me up a wall. All right.
That's funny. Yeah, you got that off your chest, Dave.
All right. Top 4 offenses that the Browns will have to face in 2024. This from Dog Pound Daily. Number 4, right out the gate, the Dallas Cowboys, 5th in yards per game, 371.6. First in points per game, almost 30 in 2023. Number 3, the Ravens. We see them every year. 5th in yards per game, 374. First in rush yards per game, 156. 4th in points per game, 28.4. Number 2, they got the Dolphins in that track team. First in yards per game, over 400. Second in points, almost 30 in 2023. And number 1, the Chiefs finished the year 9th in yards per game, 15th in points per game, 6th in pass yards per game. But they won the Super Bowl, and they got that guy named Mahomes who kind of, you can't really measure him in numbers.
No, you can't. I mean, it's a good – we knew the schedule was really good. We knew the quarterbacks the Browns would face are really good, and I think that, graphic just illuminates that, right? It's Patrick Mahomes, it's Lamar Jackson, it's the Super Bowl MVP, the regular season MVP. You add in the Dolphins and what they do with Mike McDaniel. It's a lot of good. It's just a lot of good offenses. Doesn't mean that doesn't include Justin Herbert and the Chargers and Jalen Hurts and the Eagles.
Joe Burrow and the Bengals.
Joe Burrow. Yeah, thank you, Joe Burrow. This defense that was number 1 last year, will really probably have to take a step up, right, to be able to come close to replicating what it did a year ago. Yeah,
the quality of the offenses that they're going to face will challenge them week in and week out, without question.
Yeah, I mean, look inside the division, right? You get the 4 tough games, and that's Pittsburgh's going to be better, we assume, with Arthur Smith and 2 changes at quarterback, better offensive line, and then some of those non-division games that we talked about. I mean, Dak Prescott, right? I mean, he was on that list. The Cowboys. There's some good ones there, and then you got the rookie in Washington, right? Jaden Daniels. I mean, there's a lot of marquee quarterbacks that the Browns will have to deal with.
Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com, and I are going to take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about Greg Newsome, as well as the linebacker position. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, also brownzone.com. Scott, I know you wrote an article about Greg Newsome saying all the right things, thrilled about it was not a surprise they picked up the fifth-year extension. I think everybody locally expected that to happen. Newsome said he'd like to be here long-term. I know you wrote an article. Take us through the article and just the whole tone and what you thought with talking to Newsome.
Yeah, I talked to him before it happened, and then I talked to him again after it happened, right? So he wasn't nervous, he expected to to get the fifth-year option picked up. He said he had talked to Andrew Berry, his agent had talked to Andrew Berry. So you're right, it wasn't a surprise, but he still felt grateful and blessed that it did happen because, it's a lot of money that gets guaranteed. It's more than $13 million for 2025. That's life-changing money, right? He talked about what that can do for his family. It's a big jump. I think he's making 2.4 this year, so that's a big jump, right? And then it gives him some stability with the organization. Sure, he could still be traded at any time. We've heard those rumors all off season. But is this a commitment from the Browns? Andrew Berry said it time and again that they're not just going to give away corners that can play press man. And I think Newsome, I believe him when he talks about his desire to stay here for his whole career, how he likes it here. He's made himself part of the community. The two times I talked to him were flag football events, right? So he's really bought into everything that goes with being a member of this organization. Now, that doesn't guarantee he'll be here long term, and I think he still needs to play better. But he's a quality player in this league that, I think there's a chance could stick around for a long time because it is such a premium position.
Yeah, and that's the thing about any cornerback in the NFL. There's going to be plays where you get beaten. It doesn't look good. That's just that's the nature of the job.
Yeah, for sure. And I think some people don't give enough credit to the fact that he can play outside and inside, right? And that's not easy to do, right? There's not a lot of guys that can play inside, period, right? We don't see Martin Emerson Jr. playing there very often. We don't see Denzel Ward playing there very often. And then not only do you have that ability, which is physically demanding, and you're on a slot guy that with two-way goes, then he can start the game on the outside or switch to the outside and cover man-to-man, right? And maybe that's where some of his issues are. And, I go to that Denver game with Cortland Sutton. But overall, he's proved to me that he's a starting caliber corner in this league. And those guys don't grow on trees.
All right, this one's from one of your mailbags. Were you surprised that the Browns didn't draft a linebacker sooner than the 6th round?
I was not. Now, plenty of people were, right? Because I think that we've talked about it. I would get that question all the time before the draft. Are they going to draft a linebacker? They should take one. That's a big need. And I just kept coming back to it's not a premium position. They don't value it like they do defensive line or corner. So, no, I wasn't surprised that they didn't draft one earlier. I think it made sense to draft it when they did. It was Watson. He's the guy that we talked about. I think can have a role on this team, in 2024 on special teams for sure, but even, maybe on defense. And could it grow the next couple of years? Certainly. But I don't think that's a position that the Browns are going to address very high in free agency or very high in the draft. Now, that doesn't mean they'll ignore it, right? They made the kind of the rare trade up for JOK, and I don't think they'll do that again for a linebacker. They're paying Jordan Hicks okay money, but they're never going to be at the top of the curve at that position, and I just think fans are going to have to get used to it.
Yeah, and they want to get to 2 linebackers with the way their defense plays. They can't get out of their 3 linebacker sets quickly enough. They want to be 2 linebackers, get after the quarterback, and move on. Take us through the another intriguing draft pick, the cornerback from South Dakota, Miles Harden, 7th rounder. A lot of national people think 7th round was a steal for him.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's so hard to tell because he's coming out of South Dakota, right? So the talent matchups don't necessarily translate. He played a couple games against FBS schools, so there is that on film. A lot of ball skills, had a bunch of interceptions, bunch of forced fumbles, and I think that's important, especially when you're playing against quote-unquote lesser talent. You want that to show up, right? You want to be seen as a playmaker. What the Browns like about him, they think he can play in the slot, and we talked about that's not easy to do. And the Browns are starting to get some depth there. They have Newsome. They have Cam Mitchell, who played well as a rookie in the slot. Now you add Harden to that mix. They think he also might have some safety versatility, which is an interesting idea. He said he played some safety in high school. So, seventh-round pick, it's a flyer, but he has some skills. I watched him do some backpedaling again. It's rookie minicamp. You're with other rookies. It's tough to make a huge judgment, but he looks smooth, backpedaling smooth, running around, and he's got pretty good size. So it'll be interesting to see if he can, carve out a spot, or is he a practice guy, practice squad guy, just where he fits in what's a pretty good cornerback.
All right, another one from your mailbag. Do you think the Browns have enough playmakers on the team scoring touchdowns and making game-changing plays on defense?
Yeah, on defense, I have no doubt about it. And I think the guy was asking about, the question was about both sides. On defense, Myles Garrett is a playmaker. Zadarius Smith is a playmaker. I think Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson Jr., I think Newsome, to an extent, is a playmaker. He had 2 picks last year, returned 1 for a touchdown. Grant Delpit showed some playmaking ability. There's guys on that defense, and really, you got Myles Garrett. And that's almost enough to say, yes, his defense is full of playmakers. And then on offense, to me, it comes down to how does that receiving core do? Is Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, are they good enough? Do they make enough plays to complement Amari Cooper and David Njoku? And then what happens at running back? Does Chubb play? If not, can they kind of ham and egg it to get enough production out of those running backs?
So as I look at that, something just kind of popped into my head. Is Ken Dorsey, the addition of Ken Dorsey, is that equivalent to Jim Schwartz last year? Are they hoping that he can do similar things in terms of style of play of that offense?
Yeah, that's interesting, Dave. I'm sure they're expecting or hoping for a bump, no doubt about it. I struggle with comparing them because it's all Schwartz's defense, right? He had this huge track record, won a Super Bowl, had been a head coach. And Stefanski just handed the keys to him and said, do what you want with this defense. It was a philosophical, schematic change. Ken Dorsey, yes, it's Ken Dorsey's offense. Yes, he's the coordinator. But Kevin Stefanski's still here, right? He might still call the plays. It's been his offense the last 4 years. It's going to be more of a melding, I think. Now, Dorsey, I fully expect to have a bigger role, larger say, louder voice than Alex Van Pelt did, right? It was a Stefanski offense that Van Pelt, kind of worked with during the week. And, not to diminish his role, but it was a Stefanski offense. Stefanski called the plays. This is going to feel more like a Ken Dorsey system with Kevin Stefanski having a large imprint, right? So I don't know if it'll be the same jump, but I get where you're going, and I don't think you're off base with that question.
Oh, that's absolutely fair. And the thing that I keep coming back to, Kevin Stefanski has shown the ability to, it'll be interesting to see who calls the plays, because I wouldn't be surprised one way or another. I think Stefanski is confident enough in who he is and what he can do as a head coach. He may give the play calling to Ken Dorsey.
Yeah, it is really going to be interesting. And I know some fans are sick of the discussion, but it's important, right? It's important who calls the plays. I think Stefanski, I don't know, I just keep putting myself in those shoes going, man, I think I've been good at this job for 4 years. You get your fingerprints all over the game. You want that responsibility if you got one key call on 4th down to make. Not that he won't be on the headset, but I think that's a tough thing to give up. So I would still lean towards Stefanski, but I completely leave open the possibility that it could be Dorsey, especially given what we talked about, that it's a lot of what Dorsey wants to do. Dorsey's more comfortable with that spread than maybe even Kevin Stefanski is, right? Kevin Stefanski came from the Gary Kubiak, the play action, the bootlegs, and I think we're going to see less of that with Dorsey. So I think you can make an argument that it would make more sense for Dorsey. So yeah, I'm really eager to find out who's going to call the plays.
Yeah, and you know what? If Kevin Stefanski decides to call the plays, I completely get it. I'm not saying he should give it up, but I think this time he's really going to – I think it's a possibility much more so than it has been in the past. Scott Petrak, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. BrownZone.com on the internet. He is Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Jacob Roach from BrownsWire.com and the Barking Browns podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Kevin Stefanski, two-time Coach of the Year, which I don't see him as being a Coach of the Year. He's going to run a offense from 2014 that he brought from probably Minnesota. That's going to do something for us. And while we're on the subject of running an offense, why didn't we keep Mayfield? He was a good quarterback, and I'll tell you why, because he had no direction from what you had there. You could have kept Mayfield and saved all the draft picks, that's for sure. Instead, we got Deshaun Watson, and I hope I'm wrong, but I see him built out of plastic, and he's going to get hurt again. And you're going to wind up with James Winston at quarterback. You keep on saying that it's all kind of a new offense. It's not a new offense. He's going to call the offensive plays, so that doesn't happen. The only thing that keeps me going, and I've said it before, is my dad's loyalty to the Browns. So I stay loyal to the Browns, too.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Jacob Roach from BrownsWire.com, Barking Browns podcast. A couple of things. They vote on Coach of the Year. So Coach of the Year isn't – they voted on it. He won it twice, so he's two-time Coach of the Year. Jim doesn't have a vote. I don't have a vote. You don't have a vote. The guys that have a vote voted on him. Relative to Watson – I mean, the Browns passed on him, the Panthers passed on him, the Rams passed on him. Just to remember the time frame, he wanted $35 million a year for multiple years. He isn't getting $35 million a year yet from the Buccaneers. So let's see how he does. And you know what? I'm not against Baker Mayfield. I just understood why they moved on from him. You know, Watson has gone to 3 Pro Bowls. He's been hurt. He hasn't played well for the Browns. He's been to 3 Pro Bowls. Mayfield hadn't been able to put back-to-back good seasons together. And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, just to start with the Kevin Stefanski point, what does the man have to do to garner some respect around here? I mean, you look at last year and you talk about he had a left tackle that they signed off the street playing half the year, won 11 games. He had some of the worst quarterback play we've ever seen, and that's saying something as Browns fans. So having watched the Browns, if that's some of the worst quarterback play you've ever seen, that's saying something. And he won 11 games with all of that, and that's taking a loss at the end of the year because they had already wrapped it up. He could have won 12. But I'm not really sure what it is that Stefanski's going to have to do to win over some certain people. But I think he's a fantastic coach. Like you said, the people that vote on it, the people around the league understand the type of coach he is. So I feel like we're incredibly blessed to have him here in Cleveland. But, the Watson Mayfield thing, I think you hit the nail right on the head. He just hasn't been able to do it in back-to-back years yet. And yeah, he got paid now. He's in a great situation down there in Tampa, but were you really going to give him that money after 2021? Like, I understand the injuries and the reasons that some of the stuff went wrong in Cleveland that year may not have been fully in Baker's control, but you were going to pay 35. I understand the draft picks and all that stuff, but the thing is you had to find a quarterback that could elevate to the next level. And what Watson had shown before all of the off the field and the injury things, he had shown he was a game changer. And if you don't have a game changer at quarterback, all you're doing is trying to find one.
So you wrote an article ranking the 10 wide receivers, top 10 wide receivers in the AFC North. So let's take a look at the list. You got Cooper number 2 behind Chase and between Chase and Higgins. Flowers is 5. Then the second 5, 2 Browns in it. Jerry Jeudy at 6, Elijah Moore at 9. And again, I think what the Browns are going to do is use more 3 wide receiver sets than they have in years past. And that's one of the reasons it's going to be interesting to see the way this offense unfolds.
Yeah, and I think they're in a really good spot with the 3 guys at the top of the pecking order for them. And then I even think I'm really high on the Jamari Thrash pick, so I think that'll actually come into play too. But this AFC North, as I was ranking these, I was like, oh my goodness, there is a lot of firepower at the wide receiver position in the North. But I think with what Jerry Jeudy does in the slot and specifically what he can do to stretch the field vertically, I think it's the biggest winner is going to be Elijah Moore. I think Elijah Moore sliding into the 3rd wide receiver role, I think it's just going to be perfect for him. The way he can attack, they can play him more on the outside, and I think Elijah Moore's better on the outside than the inside, which is a little surprising considering he's a smaller stature player. You would kind of think those guys usually, those quick foot, explosive off the line of scrimmage guys usually play a little bit more in the slot, but I think that he's better on the outside. But I think Amari Cooper, you're talking about a dude that, people talk, he missed 2 games last year and set a career high in receiving yards. It's like he's the consummate pro. He's going to go out there. He's going to get his. Jerry Jeudy, I think, is going to get a really nice opportunity in this offense for what the Browns are going to do, where they're going to shift the things that, Ken Dorsey and Tommy Reese and all these guys that have been brought in to put their imprints on it. I think this trio of wide receivers that the Browns have is one of the better trios in my mind and just on pure talent. So now they got to find a way to put it all together, and they brought in a lot of really respected offensive coaches, and I'm very intrigued to see how it goes.
All right, this one is from CBSSports.com tonight. About 3.5 hours, something like that. The schedule will be released by the NFL. It'll be official. So this is from CBS Sports. One wish for every NFL team in the 2024 schedule. For the Browns, to have the bulk of their home games down the stretch. Points out Browns were 8-1 at home in 2023. Jacob, we know, the openers, the Cowboys, it'll be nationally televised, 4:25, Tom Brady's debut. How many national primetime games do you think they get?
I played this game last night on my podcast, and we originally thought they might play on Christmas. And, of course, we've now found out that they're not going to play on Christmas. I would say 3. There's leaks out there of some of the ones they may play. I don't really go much off of those leaks until the NFL drops it because we've seen them be very all over the place. But I would say 3, maybe 4. I think you'll probably get them on a Sunday. I think they'll play one of each, a Thursday, a Sunday, and a Monday. I think you'll get them on there. They've got, a really tough schedule coming up, and they play a lot of really good teams. In the NFL, they showed you by what they did in week 1 by putting them on a national televised game against, a team that draws a lot of eyes in the Dallas Cowboys and Tom Brady and all this. So the NFL is telling you what they think about this Cleveland Browns roster and what this team should be in 2024 by putting them in very much in the spotlight. I know it's not a primetime game, but it's like, it's a very much in the spotlight to get Fox's game of the week to start it. So I think you're going to see 3 or 4 primetime games because I think the NFL understands the roster and the coaching staff they have in Cleveland and what could be one of the most highly anticipated Browns seasons of my lifetime.
Jacob Roach from BrownsWire.com, as well as the Barking Browns podcast, and I'm going to take one more time out. We will continue talking Browns. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Jacob Roach from BrownsWire.com, the Barking Browns podcast as well. We mentioned Browns-Cowboys play nationally televised game week 1. LaShawn McCoy, FS1 speak on if Dak Prescott or Deshaun Watson has more to gain this season.
I'm going to go Deshaun Watson. The last thing I could think of Deshaun Watson, right, outside of a Browns uniform, is he was exciting. He was electrifying, right? You want the ball in his hands, right, because he can throw it, make all the passes in the pocket or outside the pocket. The play breaks down, he can run the ball. That's who Deshaun Watson I know.
Yeah.
Nobody looks at him like that no more.
At all.
So when you ask me who has more to gain, it has to be Deshaun. We need this. I'm not even asking to be like the super Deshaun Watson we used to see. Just be competent enough, right? Guys, open, deliver it, on time. Look like you a quarterback. He looked awful the last times I've been saying him, right? I mean, and to think that a 40-year-old come off the couch and lead this team to the playoffs, and you rather have him than Deshaun Watson? Yeah. Because you asking me, I'd rather have Joe Flacco than Deshaun Watson. Yeah, I'm going to say it.
Right now or last year?
Last year. I'm going to say it. So I just need to see Deshaun Watson of old, and if he can get back to that, just a little bit back to that, I think they'll get some more respect.
Jacob, when you think about Watson last year, the injury jumps out, but he was, if you go back and you look at it, he was in for 2 games, out for a game, in for 2 games. There was no consistency where he was on the field playing with the 11 or 10 other guys in the offense where he could get into a rhythm.
Yeah, that's the toughest part of trying to figure this whole situation out for the Browns at quarterback is like he's just not been out there, and people want to grade the trade. Was it worth it? Who won? Who lost? And to me, it's still incomplete because we really don't know what Deshaun Watson's going to look like in Cleveland. We got 6 games, after the suspension, and that was, they simplified everything. It looked horrible. Last year, there was some really high highs, some low lows, some moments, and it was like he played his best with a broken shoulder against Baltimore and a high ankle sprain. It's still crazy to me. But like something that LaShawn McCoy talked about in that clip that's really interesting that kind of lines up with what Watson has said. Watson on this past week on his podcast talked about taking what the defense gives them and stop trying to be a superhero all the time. Like his point was like, I can take these 5-yard routes, these crossers, these underneaths, and throw it to guys like David Njoku who really excel after the catch and allow the players around him to help him. He doesn't have to be the entire offense. And I think we're going to potentially see more of that from Deshaun Watson. I hope that, that's not just player speak and that is something he's taken to heart. But we just really haven't seen enough to really grade it unless him not being on the field is how you decide to make your grade. And that's fine. I understand that. But I just don't think right now we can really completely pass judgment on it. And I'm just hoping that, this year he's on the field. So one way or the other, we're able to kind of figure out, how this trade's going to end.
So I know you wrote an article for Browns Wire, 5 Browns who could lose their roster spots to rookies. So we went offensive guard Michael Dunn, linebacker Tony Fields, wide receiver David Bell, defensive tackle Maurice Hurst or Siaka Ika, offensive tackle James Hudson. Take us through, and there you see the list, the 5 guys that could lose their roster spots. Take us through that and just kind of what you were thinking as you put that together.
The thing with Michael Dunn, I think Michael Dunn's story and how he comes into that 2020 playoff season and what he did was just phenomenal. And then he had some big starts in 21 for Joel Bitonio when they put Bitonio out to left tackle. But ever since then, the injuries have really started to pile up for Michael Dunn, who's now north of 30. And he's just a guy that has spent a lot of time on injured reserve, a lot of time as an injured scratch. And I just think they then go and get Zach Zenner, who's probably your swing guard this year. And there's also a chance that James Hudson becomes a guard, I think. But I just think Zinter comes in. He becomes the guard that can play right. That's his natural position. I know they're going to cross-train into left guard as well. And then you feel pretty good because you've got Whippler who can play some guard and play some center. And then you just kind of get younger. And I know Michael Dunn doesn't cost a lot of money, but you get younger and more even cheaper. And so I just think that Dunn, they drafted his position specifically very high. So that's kind of same thing with David Bell. Is I don't know how many wide receivers they're going to keep. And now you're looking at Jamari Thrash, and you know how Andrew Berry works. He's not really going to cut draft picks this year that are high draft picks. He might cut guys in the 7th, so I don't see him moving on from Jamari Thrash. And I just think when I compare David Bell and Jamari Thrash, what's the ultimate decision maker for me? And that's physical athleticism and talent. And I think just from an athleticism and physical gifts point, Jamari Thrash beats out David Bell. So that's for me why I'd move on from that position. The defensive tackle position's really hard because they just drafted Ika last year, and we know that Barry doesn't like to move on from his draft picks that quickly. And they just signed Maurice Hurst, and he's been a really big, impactful player last year, and they bring him back. But you drafted 2. You drafted 2 defensive tackles. They're definitely not cutting Michael Hall, so one of those guys is probably going to go unless you think they'll keep 6 defensive tackles and run with 11 defensive linemen total. I'm not totally sure they're going to go down that route. So I think one or the other potentially is out because of that. It's kind of like a toss-up there. The thing about James Hudson is originally the Browns signed Jalen Sundle to a UDFA contract, and then all of a sudden when rookie minicamp came last week, he's nowhere to be found. He's not on the roster officially anymore. I can't find anything news-wise, so I think James Hudson's probably safe as a result, just because, they ended up not bringing in the guy I thought they were going to bring in to replace him.
Yeah, and then the other one, Fields, the Watson, Nathaniel Watson is a guy that they drafted and they like a lot.
Yeah, and Watson is so intriguing to me because you're talking about an off-ball linebacker leading the SEC in sacks. Come on. He's a situational pass rusher, but that wasn't his primary job. I think Watson will be fantastic on special teams, and that's kind of where Tony Fields has held on to his roster spot with some of the special teams. And I think the upside of Watson is a little bit higher. I think he's a little bit more physically gifted than Tony Fields. And I think ultimately you take the guy that can bring some pass rush and just some versatility and some things that Tony Fields just can't do physically.
Jacob Roach, BrownsWire.com, as well as the Barking Browns podcast, as always. Great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight, Jacob.
Thanks, guys.
Jacob Roach, make sure you check him out, BrownsWire.com. He is also co-host of the Barking Browns podcast. Before we go, some good news for a friend of the show. Mary Kay Cabot was on yesterday. She finds out that she is again a finalist for the 3rd year in a row for the prestigious Bill Nunn Award, which goes to the Outstanding Pro Football Writers of America coverage, whoever is a beat reporter. Again, she is finalist for the Bill Nunn Jr. Award given by Pro Football Writers of America to a reporter who has made a long and distinguished contribution to pro football through her coverage. So, congratulations to Mary Kay Cabot, again, a finalist for that award that is done in conjunction with Pro Football Hall of Fame. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.